Picture this. It's 6:47 in the morning. The plant floor hasn't fully come to life yet. The hum of the kilns is just starting to build, and I'm sitting across a conference table from a plant manager who has just told me, flatly, arms crossed, that he will not be implementing the new attendance policy. Not can't, won't. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could pull rank, I could escalate, I could send an email chain that would eventually land on someone's desk at corporate, or I could negotiate. I chose to negotiate. And what happened next changed the way I think about leadership, influence, and the quiet power that lives inside every well crafted conversation. We often think of negotiation as something that happens in boardrooms over contracts, or in labor disputes, or on a car lot. But in my facility and across manufacturing environments everywhere, negotiation is happening every single day. It happens when an HR leader is trying to align a department head on workforce planning. It happens when a supervisor is navigating a performance issue with a long tenured employee. And it happens when we're competing for budget, talent, or resources in a company that has 10,000 priorities at once. And here's what the research tells us and what I've lived. Negotiation is not about winning. It is about creating value that didn't exist before the conversation started, according to William Ury, co-author of Getting to Yes. In non-union manufacturing environments specifically, executives don't have collective bargaining agreements to fall back on. There is no rule book that says this is how we resolve this. What we have instead is relationship, influence, and skill. That is both a challenge and an extraordinary opportunity. So over the years, through formal training, through failure, and through some genuinely uncomfortable conversations, I've landed on three foundational principles that I believe are non-negotiable in any negotiation, especially at the executive level. First principle is to separate the person from the problem. Fisher and Ury introduced this concept in Getting to Yes, and it remains one of the most powerful reframes I've ever encountered. When that plant manager told me he wouldn't implement the attendance policy, my first instinct was to think he was being difficult. But then I separated him from the problem. I started asking different questions. What does he actually need? What is he afraid of losing? And what pressures is he under that I can't see from where I'm sitting? When I asked those questions out loud, the conversation shifted entirely. He wasn't resistant to the policy. He was terrified of losing two key supervisors who he felt would be unfairly impacted. Once I understood that, we could actually solve something together. Second principle is to focus on interests, not positions. This is where most negotiations break down. A position is what someone says they want. An interest is why they want it. The plant manager's position was, I won't implement this policy. His interest was, I need to protect my team and maintain operational continuity. Those are very different conversations. And the second one, well, that's one I can work with. Third is create options before you commit. One of the biggest mistakes I see executives make, and one I made myself early in my career, is coming to a negotiation with only one solution in mind. When you only have one solution, you're not negotiating, you're demanding, just politely. Chris Voss, the former FBI hostage negotiator and author of Never Split the Difference, calls this the danger of the single option. He argues that the best negotiators always arrive with multiple viable paths forward because flexibility signals confidence, not weakness. Before any significant negotiation, I now ask myself, what are three ways this could work? Not one, three. So let's get practical, because principles are beautiful, but techniques are what you use at 6:47 in the morning when someone's arms are crossed. First is tactical empathy. Chris Voss describes tactical empathy as the ability to recognize and vocalize the emotions of the person across the table, not to manipulate them, but to demonstrate that you genuinely see them. It sounds like this. It seems like you're carrying a lot of pressure around this rollout, and I want to make sure I understand what that looks like from your side. That one sentence, in my experience, has opened more doors than any PowerPoint presentation I've ever built. Second is the calibrated question. Also from Voss, calibrated questions are open-ended questions that begin with how or what, and they do something remarkable. They put the other person in the driver's seat of solving the problem. Instead of, you need to comply with this policy, try, what would need to be true for this to work on your floor? That question hands them ownership, and people support what they help create. And third is the strategic pause. This one is deceptively simple and wildly underused. Silence is not awkward, silence is information. When you make a key point and then stop talking, you create space for the other person to fill. And what they fill it with tells you everything about where the real conversation needs to go. I once negotiated a significant compensation adjustment for a critical retention case by simply making the business case and then saying nothing for 11 seconds. 11 seconds. The VP across the table approved it before I spoke again. Now, for those of us operating at the senior management level in a manufacturing environment, there's an additional layer that I want to address directly. When you're a senior manager, you're almost never negotiating for yourself. You're negotiating on behalf of the workforce, the culture, and the organization's long-term health. That changes the stakes and it changes the approach. And here's what I've learned. Your credibility is your currency. In manufacturing, credibility is built on the floor, not in the office. When executives know that you understand operations, that you've been in the plant, and that you speak the language of throughput and headcount and turnover cost, they listen differently. Relationships are built before you need them. The worst time to build a relationship with a plant manager is when you need something from them. I invest time every single week in conversations that have no agenda because those conversations are the foundation of every negotiation that comes later. And data is persuasion. In a non-union environment, when you're advocating for a policy, a program, or a cultural shift, come with numbers. Turnover cost, engagement scores, productivity correlation. When your argument is anchored in data, it becomes significantly harder to dismiss. So let me bring you back to that conference room, 6:47 in the morning. After we separated the person from the problem, after we explored interests instead of positions, after I asked what would need to be true for this to work, we built a modified implementation plan together, one that honored the spirit of the policy and addressed his legitimate operational concerns. He presented it to his supervisors, they adopted it, and 6 months later, that plant had the best attendance metrics in the region. He didn't just implement the policy, he owned it. That is the power of negotiation done right. It is not manipulation, it is not coercion. It is not about being the loudest voice or the most senior title in the room. It is about creating the conditions where two people or 10 people can arrive somewhere better together than either of them could have arrived alone. That is the art. And like all art, it takes practice. It takes humility, and it takes the courage to stay in the conversation even when it's uncomfortable. So here's my invitation to you. The next time you walk into a difficult conversation, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what does this person actually need, and how can I help us both get there? That question alone will change everything. Thank you.